I hate technology sometimes. I love it because it's like, where else would I get to chat with Stephen? And Neil's just disappeared, so we'll forget about him and his long,
Neil,
heavy metal looking hair.
Neil is about 24 inches away to my left.
Yes,
Okay.
there he is. I'm
Right
sure.
here.
I'm sure he'll keep chipping in now and again, which is more than welcome because you two have got a lot in common. I'm gonna get to the strange characters that Neil's getting you playing
Hmm.
in a minute and how you deal with that. It's
Neil is pointing. I'm looking at, by the way, nice to meet you. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
anytime, Stephen.
I've got two bits for you. I love Snake Plissken and Escape from New York. So I see your picture over there.
Yep.
And my friend Sid Stembridge did all the gun work for that film. And
Really?
and he also did the gun work for Scarface. So the
Oh,
right above your head, I'm looking at say
yep.
hello to my little friend. Yeah, he also did
Wow.
that as well. So
You are an amazing human being, I've discovered, Stephen. I have had the pleasure of chatting with Neil many, many times over the past, has it been like 10 years or something, Neil? You can
yeah.
chip in now and again.
Yes. Yes.
And he's mentioned you many times, not in a weird stalky way, so I don't think he's got, Stephen voodoo dolls lying around anywhere, but he speaks very highly of you, and I always get a little bit excited when he mentions you because it's like I'm obviously going to mention Star Trek at some point in this conversation. I think I would be remiss if I didn't. I think a lot of people would be mad at me. Um, but you've done so much more. Your filmography and how you came to be an actor
Mhm.
fascinates me. And I'm going to touch upon how you were taught to read and maybe get you to elaborate on that.
Okay.
Just mind blowing fact that I read earlier on. And you've been in a lot of TV shows that I grew up watching. My aunt, who's unfortunately no longer, with us, she was a massive fan of Little House on the Prairie.
Oh, okay.
And so if she is looking down on me and I didn't ask about your experience on Little House, she would be giving me the middle finger, I suspect.
All right. We'll make sure we talk about that. I have a lot to talk about Little House on the Prairie
Yep.
as well. Whatever you want to talk about. I when I do a convention once in a while and the fans come up to my table, my wife says you're putting the fans to sleep. You're talking too much. So I have a lot of information about things to give to people.
I've just got back from a convention last weekend as well, and I'm a huge fan of Comic Cons in general and conventions. And I prefer to go and listen to the guest or the celebrity talking. So I don't really. I'm sure they're not fascinated to hear what I've got to say or what generally a lot of what other people have got to say. I think they love hearing the stories that you would say. So the fact that you could talk too much, no, that's getting thrown out of court. That one, it really is.
Okay. Some of my perspectives are a little bit different than I don't want to say your average actor. God forbid you call me a celebrity, but celebrities when they're at conventions, things like that. I've known a lot of people. I've known a lot of grunts in the trenches that make TV, that make films that people never hear about, they never see, that their work ends up on the screen. I had a lot of old timers. You'll probably ask me about my grandfather, et cetera, et cetera. They still knew him when I was a little guy. So they kept a good eye on me on the sets. But, these were the guys who were the grips, the guys who were the cable pullers, the special effects guys, the camera guys, people that are, in a way, the unslung heroes that schlepped stuff all over these film sets. They're just as important as anybody else. So I often talk a lot about them, and
Good.
people like to hear about that.
I'm one of these that I mean I grew up in the cinema. I was born in 71. Around about 78, 79 onwards was when I would take myself off to the cinema all day and just jump from screen to screen. It was a three cinema thing. I would just watch absolutely everything. And even from an early age, I would always sit until the very last credit aired.
Mm-hmm.
And I still do that now, whether I'm watching it on TV, because it's not Tom Cruise that's plugging in the lights or Tom Cruise that's making the soup for
Mm-hmm.
people's lunch and stuff. It is the unsung heroes. It's the carpenters, the grips, the electricians, the editors, the composers, and
Yes,
there's a lot of
yes,
ingredients go into making a movie, as I'm sure
a
anybody
lot.
listening to us, obviously you two are very familiar with that. Um, But yeah, it's always nice to talk about the unsung heroes.
Yes, yes, it is. Yes, it is. Well, where would you like to start? I'll follow your lead.
I would like to start with your grandfather.
Huh?
So Stephen Soldy, is that how you pronounce? Or is
Yes,
it? Yeah.
yes. Stephen E. Soldi. He was born in Naples, Italy, right below Mount Vesuvius, that blew up and etc. And he moved to America with his three brothers. I think it was about 1912, 1911, right about there. And he was working in a shoe shop for years. And when the First World War broke out, he joined the army. He became a doughboy, and they sent him over to France. And about a month later, the war ended. So he was there for a little while longer before they shipped him back to the States. He was now an American citizen because he had joined the armed forces. And he got a job with a circus as a clown. And part of his duty was to maintain the lion cages
Wow.
in the train car that they rode around the country. And eventually he ended up in Los Angeles. And the film business was just starting to get started there. And D.W. Griffith was making Intolerance. And a lot of people don't realize silent films, the people actually had dialogue. They were memorizing their lines and they were speaking. It was just, there was no sound yet, so they used the title cards. But he wanted people who spoke Italian to play Roman soldiers in Intolerance. And so Grandpa Soldi auditioned, as many other people did, and he got a job in Intolerance as a Roman soldier. And I actually have his tinted black and white wardrobe test shot from
Wow.
Intolerance in his portfolio. He
Wow.
was, I think, 19 or 20 years old at the time. And he said, the hell with it. I'm staying here. This looks like a great business. It's a great part of the country. It's Los Angeles. And like Buster Keaton mentions, at that point, the air in Los Angeles tasted like wine when you breathed it. It was
Okay.
really a great place to be. And he was there all the way until 1966. He got injured on a Disney film doing a stunt in a film called Bullwhip Griffin. But between Intolerance and Bullwhip Griffin, he never stopped working character bits. He never became a star. Rarely did he get a credit, but they would always call and say, hey, we got a job for Steve. And he would show up. Well, what was needed? He was a waiter in the Marx Brothers Night at the Opera. He's in that famous shot where they all tumble out into the hallway from that crowded stateroom. I have pictures of him with Charlie Chaplin in Echo Park in the late teens, early 20s, directing a short film that Charlie Chaplin was in with the Christie comedies that
Yeah.
Chaplin was a part of for a couple of years. He was Peter Lorre's stunt double. He was Edward G. Robinson's stunt double. He's one of the students in the original Frankenstein in the beginning of the film, where all those guys are watching, the lecture. And he actually I'm adopted. I was adopted, and so he's my adopted grandfather. But he got my adopted mom the part of the little Maria in Frankenstein. And when she went to go
Wow.
and meet Karloff, she was so terrified of him, she went into hysteria that they had to say, sorry, Steve, we can't use Stella.
Oh no.
And they went with a young girl that they did. But you'll see him in Singing in the Rain. He's the guy that takes the umbrella from Gene Kelly at the end of the Singing in the Rain routine.
I get tingles, genuine like
Yeah, yeah,
tingles.
he was
Yeah.
getting downpoured on, and Gene Kelly hands him the umbrella, and he bows at him. So I was very fortunate that this man was in my life. He was the biggest influence on me of anybody, bigger than my parents, uh, most everyone. And he lived with us after his wife passed away. He had a little house in an area called Silver Lake.
Hmm.
Have you seen the Laurel and Hardy short music box where they take the piano up that great
Yes.
big staircase?
Yep.
Some of that was done in a studio, some of it was a set, but some of the exteriors were actually, that's a real staircase that still exists. and it's off of Hollywood Boulevard and Michael Turina Avenue in Hollywood in Silver Lake. Well, he lived just up the street from that. So if you look hard, you can kind of see where his house is in the background. A lot of movie people lived in that area. There was a courtyard of bungalows across the street from his house where all the little people who were munchkins in the Wizard of Oz lived, and they also stunt doubled children.
Yeah.
I'm digressing.
You keep
He
digressing. This is fascinating stuff. This is like tingle inducing.
he lived with us after his wife passed away, and he took a look at me, and I was always with him. He spoke Italian, he spoke French, he spoke Spanish, because a lot of people in Naples spoke Spanish, and English. He tried to teach me those languages. I can only say a few things in each one. But one day he took me by the hand and we went down to the Screen Actors Guild. And the man who was the president was a gentleman named Ken Orsatti, whose son, Ernie Orsatti, was the fellow in the Poseidon Adventure who falls off of the table and smashes into the glass.
Love that movie.
Yep. Yeah, he was also one of the two firemen in the Towering Inferno that Steve McQueen sends up to the top floor. He was the one in the elevator that Steve McQueen's holding on to when he falls out of the elevator and he drops. And they spoke in Italian for about an hour. They had known each other for years. And I walked out with a Screen Actors Guild card. You could sort of do that back then. That was 1970, you know. But he taught me how to read by showing me film scripts. And when he would teach me how to read, he also taught me the stage directions. Okay. And his portfolios, I still have them. They're antiques. But when I started to audition and eventually book some roles, if I was on the back lot at Warner Brothers studio, they still had that. Warner Brothers still, for the most part, the back lot is intact. I'd recognize the streets that he was on. And it was very important for me to do a good job for Grandpa Soldi. Yeah. Because, you know, film sets have a lot of different personalities on them, and sometimes they can be very trying. So it was very important for me to do a good job, be easy to work with, and also easy for the crew members. And like I said, a lot of them still knew Grandpa Soldi, so they kept a really good eye on me. You know, for the most part, kept me safe and let me know what was going on. And they taught me a lot of things, you know. I learned how to make breakaway glass by going to the special effects shop at MGM and watching, I don't know what the man's name was. He was an old timer at the time. I'm sure he is long gone, but he showed me on a hot table how they'd make breakaway glass panes out of pico resin. The makeup guys, of course, fake blood? Here, Stephen, we'll show you how to make fake blood. You know, the camera guys, do you know what we're seeing through the lens? Come over here and take a look. You know, and I would put all these things together to try and make my work better, even at a younger age. I knew it was a collaborative effort, that the work was, we're not making concrete, we're not laying bricks, but even still, a film set is not an easy place to be, really. No. And it can be quite chaotic. A lot of things can be intimidating to people who haven't grown up on film sets and stuff. Like, they might not know what the equipment is all about. I got a very good education in that from a very, very early age.
It's like the best film school, isn't it? To be on a set rather than learning about it in a classroom, which I'm sure you've also learned in class. I learned something else that you either studied under or you worked with one of my favorite actors, Miguel Ferrer.
Yes.
So I thought, I'm like, Stephen's just like, we're just like running parallel along. The things I watch are the things you've done.
Yeah. So that was very important to me. I got to work with some wonderful people. I enjoyed the work. In the 70s, man, in the 70s. At Universal Studios, you know, I did several projects over there. And I remember one day my mom couldn't talk. She was shaking like this. And I said, "What happened?" And she said, I just saw Lee Majors, the $6 million man, come out of his dressing room. My God, wow. He's so gorgeous. You know, it was that period of time. I remember seeing Peter Falk as Columbo, just as disheveled as he looks in the TV show, you know, kind of coming out of his dressing room one time and looking around, and his script was all rolled up in his hand and going off to shoot his stuff.
Hmm.
I worked on a lot of stuff there. Emergency, Adam 12, Marcus Welby. I did several pilots over there, a couple of series, a Western called Sarah that starred Brenda Vaccaro as a school marm, in the Western era. They shot
Em-
that on the Western streets back there. And
Emergency was
and the big one, the Hindenburg.
the Hindenburg I enjoyed. The Emergency was the first TV show I ever remember watching as a kid. I don't know what year we got it in the UK,
Oh,
but I do remember it was the one show
hmm.
that I would watch weekly and be excited about. It's like, oh, Emergency's on. I
Yeah,
don't know if it was originally in 72, 73, because I don't think I can remember when I was one or two watching TV. So I'm guessing there may have been reruns or we got the show later here it was in Scotland where I
I
was
think
born. But
you must have gotcha. It must have been a little bit later. The show started in 73.
right.
And I know that I worked on two episodes in 1974. I was very fortunate. I got to be in the hospital with Dixie McCall, Kelly Brackett, and Joe Early, the doctors.
Yeah.
And then about 6 months later, I got to work with Johnny and Roy because I got bit by a dog and I hated firemen. So
Oh, oops.
it was really cool.
Your character was in the wrong show if they hated firemen, weren't they, really? It's like different show.
The show, that particular episode was John Gage was always looking for a girlfriend, right?
Yeah.
And I guess at the beginning of that show, he met this wonderful young lady, and oh my gosh, he was falling in love, and she was just the greatest thing in the world. Well, their call to the kid that got bit by the dog, I was her kid, but he didn't know that. And so when he shows up and I say firemen stink, and they say, oh gosh, look at this, where's the kid's mom? And then another kid comes out, and another kid comes out, and finally a little baby comes walking up, and she comes running out of her car and says, oh, these are all my kids. And of course, Randolph Mantooth does one of his
Yeah.
moments on that show. So comedy, Johnny Gage, that girl wasn't for him.
I am going to touch upon again your grandpa. At what age
Mhm.
did you realize that your grandpa was this legend, that this is him with Charlie Chaplin and, stunt doubling for Edward G. Robinson and stuff? Was there oh my God, that was him type moment?
Are okay, you're familiar with Cinema Paradiso, right?
I only
The
saw
Italian
that. Do
film.
you know what? I only saw that film for the first time last year when the Blu-ray came out. I'm
Okay,
like, that's a gap in my filmography. I'm going to watch it. I love that film.
okay.
Beautiful film.
So the relationship between the little boy and Alfredo, the projectionist, just project that onto my relationship with Grandpa Soldi and
Okay.
myself. That's what it was like. I was with him all the time. So when he would show me his portfolio, I guess I just became acclimated to it.
Yeah.
But when I met people on film sets who said, hey, how's Steve Soldi doing? Or after he passed away, they'd say, oh, we knew your grandfather. We're sorry he's gone. He was just so much a part of me.
Mm.
And when I would do my work, I always kept that in mind. I always kept that in mind.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be going back watching things like Singing in the Rain and all these films that you've mentioned at the beginning, because it's I can never watch every single film that's out there. It's absolutely impossible. But there are
Oh,
a lot of films that I do treasure, a lot of the
mhm.
classics and whatnot.
Yes, yes. And, when I was a little guy, all those people on those sets over at Universal or Warner Brothers or wherever it was I happened to be working, they had all gotten their chops in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, that golden
Mm.
era of Hollywood. Was just Steven Spielberg hadn't made Jaws yet, although when I was working on the Hindenburg, several of the crew had been on Jaws, and they were grateful to be back on the lot because it was so difficult to shoot
Yeah.
over on Martha's Vineyard, right?
Yeah.
They had a feeling it was going to be a good film, but I would hear about, quote, this kid. When somebody said this kid, I thought it was a 10-year-old like me, who
Yeah.
was making film. But that style of filmmaking and the advancement in that kind of storytelling with that group of guys, Spielberg, Scorsese, Coppola, Brian De Palma, all those hadn't really hit yet,
No.
just on the cusp of it. So I was still around a lot of the old timers, who were used to working with the older movie stars, many of whom I met who were wonderful people too.
I'm sitting here drinking coffee out of my Jaws mug.
Oh,
So, yeah,
there you go.
as if,
50th anniversary.
as if that's crazy. I try not to think about that because I'm like, hang on a minute, that makes me, oh, yes, I did. Because
I
I
know.
saw Jaws in the theaters. So, probably too
Me,
young to see it in the theaters, but I did see it there. So,
no, I think you were just the right age,
yeah.
right?
So, I was looking at the TV, Ography, Kung Fu, Streets
Mhm.
of San Francisco, Police Story, Emergency, Love Boat, Days of Our Lives, Little House on the Prairie. That is just a drop in the ocean of the TV shows that you have appeared in
Oh,
previous to the Star Trek movie that we will touch upon. But so that's a lot of shows.
yes.
It's
There was a period of time, you have when you're a minor, right?
yeah,
And you're working in film or television, you have to do during the school year 3 hours of school somewhere every day on a film set where you're working, and they have a studio teacher who supervises that and fills out a timesheet and all that kind of stuff. Now you know about production. Find 3 hours during the day to get your
no,
school work in,
no,
forget it. That
no.
just goes down the toilet. Unless
Yeah.
you're a genius like Jodie Foster, who was brilliant. She played my sister when I was 7 years old in the Kansas City Bombers. She was doing her school in French. That's an anomaly. That's a
Yeah.
completely different thing. She was so smart, always has been. Me, forget it. My schoolwork down the toilet. But yeah, uh, I there was a period of time where I worked so much that I only was in a public school 2 months in 2 years. I remember.
And what was that like going from? Because I can imagine pretty much any time period where you show up for your 2 months, or whether it's a week here and a week there, they're like, "Oh, look, it's the actor kid back again. Oh, thinks he's better than
Yeah,
everybody else." Was there an element of that that went on, or
there was a school in Hollywood called the Hollywood Professional School. It was a black and white building, looked like it belonged in a silent film. And the school catered to children and teens who were in the motion picture television industry. So they knew how the studios worked. And it also catered to celebrities who traveled a lot and their children had to be in school and they understood the,
good?
the professional actor, actress, singer, whatever understood the lifestyle. So they accommodated all of that. My dad didn't want me to be there. He didn't think it was the right thing to do. He was kind of a rough and tough guy who became a cop in Los Angeles. He'd been an airborne trooper in Korea. He said, "Oh, Stephen's got to go to public school." I weigh it. When I talk to my colleagues, Patrick Laberto, Stephen Gustafson, who was Buddy on the Electric Company, other people, guys and men who did a show for my friend Patrick, who also has a podcast. We all suffered kind of the same fate in public school. We all kind of became loners.
Mhm.
I still have my childhood friend to this day. He's a great fellow, my dear friend. But no matter what you do, you're just not going to fit in. You're just
Yeah.
not going to fit in. You're ahead of all of those people because of your work ethic.
Mhm.
You're making adult wages, which shocks a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
people. And the things that are important to your school peers are not the things that are financially really important when you're working on a film set and they say, "Hey, we just made a mistake. There's a problem with the schedule. We got to have you memorize this now,
Yeah.
and it's got to be shot. We're going to lose tens of thousands of dollars." How do you equate that with what an average high school person is
Yeah,
supposed
you
to.
can't, can you? It's not, no,
It just
different
it
worlds.
just doesn't work. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Mm.
you're on different footing,
Mm.
that affects you in a lot of different ways,
Yeah.
and if you get through it unscathed, it's kind of like hitting Normandy Beach. I tell all of my child actor buddies, I tell all of them, I say, hey, no matter what we've been through, we've hit the shingle. We're at the seawall. Now we just have to
Yeah.
move inland at this point. Okay. We made it off the beach. A lot of my peers and colleagues in the film, did not, unfortunately, for all kinds of various reasons. But I tell Patrick and I tell Steve, and I said, hey, we made it off the beach. We're at the shingle,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Equate it with private rock.
Keep pushing forward and then just hope for the best, really, isn't it? If you give it your best shot and hopefully
That's
the movie gods are smiling on you, I guess.
That's right. That's right. However, we'll put the Scots guards right in front of us, so we've got some cover.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much, pretty much. Always comes in handy. So so I do not forget Little
Uh-huh.
House on the Prairie.
Yes.
What's your memories from that? Your general overview of your time on the Little House.
Okay. So that your aunt is happy, right? Because
Yep,
she's watching.
yep,
I had been auditioning for Little House on the Prairie for years, since the inception of the show. Now, again, my buddy Patrick ended up on the show. He was a regular. His brother Matthew played,
yeah,
Michael
yeah.
and kid on there for years and years. And a lot of friends of mine had guested on that TV show. And I would go in, I got pegged as kind of the starving child, the European war orphan. I looked like Jack Wild when I was a little kid. If I played kids with diseases and handicaps and speech impediments and, things like that. Um, and I never got cast in Little House on the Prairie. Now, I would audition for Michael Landon, who was a class act, very nice fellow. Uh, the way that you see him in interviews and on the show, that's really the way he was. He cared about people. And he would say, Stephen, you did a great job. Wow, that was a great audition. Oh boy, that's great. I'd walk out the door and I'd never hear anything from it. So what, 8, 9 years goes by. It's the last season of the show. And there was the Gambini the Great episode. It was between a younger Italian acrobat or an older a teenager Italian acrobat. He wasn't sure which way he wanted to go. And the lady who was the casting director, Susan Zuckerman, she called me in. I had a good reputation. Casting people would call me into the office. That's the way
Nice.
it was back then. And she said, I think you can do this role. He wants to see the younger guy. Great, give him a choice. He's the director. That's his prerogative, obviously. And I went to the audition. Michael Landon had a little mobile dressing room on wheels. It looked like a little shack. Sometimes they had those in sound stages, right? They could move them around if they needed to. So the young fellow went in first and he read with Michael Landon. He was in about 10 minutes and he came walking out and he split. He was about 12 or 13 years old. I was 16. I walked in. Michael Lannon's sitting there, just him, nobody else. He said, hi, Stephen, nice to see you. I said, great to see you. I didn't want to say again, but I did my performance for him. And he said, once again, great job, Stephen. Boy, that was really good. Oh, thank you for coming in. Now, I turned and I to the door and I put my hand on the doorknob. And I'm not this type of a person. I'm not assertive, aggressive type thing. But in a polite way, I thought I gotta tell him how I feel because I'm probably not going to come back to this show again. And I turned around, I said, Mr. Lennon, can I ask you a question? And he said, sure, Stephen. I said, I've been coming to audition for you for 8 or 9 years. You tell me I do a great job. You've cried a couple of times during these emotional scenes where I get, but you never hire me. I said, Patrick's been on your show. Matt's been on your show. Buddies of mine have been on your show. I said, when are you going to hire me? I'm beginning to think, you don't like me. And he laughed and he said, I'll see you Monday. And he threw the script at me.
Wow. Do you think, though, that you would maybe not have got that role if you hadn't have turned to the door? I mean, well, you'll never know unless he told you.
You never know. You never know. He had a really great sense of humor. He was the type of fellow who I remember we were shooting on a Monday night. It was the first night that episode was to be shot. The guy who played my dad was a famous character actor named Jack Crushing, who could do all kinds of accents and stuff. So he was a play the Italian, a guy always in the bed. He injured himself during one of these acrobatic tricks. And my dad was with me that night, and Michael Landon introduced himself to Sam. Sam, like I said, a guy's guy. Men loved Sam. I guess they could tell he had shrapnel inside him from a hand grenade. And Michael Landon said, what time is it, Sam? And Sam gave him the time. He said, oh boy, Monday Night Football is going to be coming up soon, and we still have a lot of stuff to shoot. And the crew was like, yeah. So Michael Landon had a big screen TV brought over from the AV department on the MGM lot. He got the cafeteria to send over some sandwiches and stuff. And he said, I can't have the sound up, but let's watch the game while we're while we're
Nice.
shooting these scenes and doing our setup, And I'll never forget Michael Landon standing there. At one point, we were between something, so they turned the sound up and everybody was watching it. And Michael Landon was, oh, what'd you think of the play, Sam? Oh my God, we're going to win the game. So that's the kind of guy that he was.
Like you say, you see on interviews and on the programs he does, whether it's Little House, whether it's Highway to Heaven, that he does come across as one of those really likable people. So it's really nice to hear that. In fact, he was a really likable person. So it's
Yes,
yeah,
yes. He ran his, it starts at the top down. If the director is stressed out and upset and just uncertain, it's just going to trickle.
yeah.
Because the crew's there ready to go and they want to know what they need to do. And, there's schedules you got to think about, stuff like that. It ran smooth as cream. There was never a problem. He always had everything arranged to go where he wanted it to go, and the crew all loved him. The lady who was the DP, the director of photography on that episode for that season, Brianne Murphy, she was the first woman admitted to the ASC as a cinematographer, card holding DP.
Yeah.
I'd worked with her several times, and also other guys in the crew. So I knew some people on that, which dovetails into Star Trek later on. Some of those people were on Trek 3, so.
So I could literally spend hours and hours. Don't worry, I won't take up your whole day quizzing you about your entire career. But one of the things that fascinates me is how different is the film/TV industry nowadays compared to the way it was, and do you prefer the way it was to the way it is now? There's more than one question in there, but
okay. Back in the 70s, man, and the 80s, right? Everything was shot on film. It was the film industry. And if you mess up a piece of film, it costs a lot of money, right? So they rehearsed everything as much as possible. And the director, the crew, they all got everything ready so you could give a performance and they could get it and make their show out of it. So everything was rehearsed very, very carefully, multiple times. That's why when they say print take 3, take 1 and 2, something was wrong with it. Why? It costs a lot of money to put it through the lab. Just print the third one. Don't print the first or the second one. Yeah. With that, there was a discipline, I find. There was a work ethic, a different kind of a work ethic, a different kind of a discipline. The digital technology has made it easier for people to make things, but sometimes, not all, sometimes I have found it's at the cost of that ethic. So often there's no rehearsal time. They'll shoot with 5 cameras at one time. So whereas before, where it was a great big Panavision camera that was shooting you, or an Aeroflex or something like that, and they did it, quote, film style, one shot at a time. They knew the footage that was going to the editors, now they'll just shoot with 10 cameras at once. A few times, no one has said action, and we didn't even know they were shooting. But since they've got so many cameras and so much footage, they hand it off to somebody that exists in a building someplace who cuts these things together and just pulls so much that they make a rhythm out of it. Often, well, not often, I shouldn't say that. Sometimes it doesn't match the scene you were even doing. It's a different ball game, and it depends on the filmmakers involved. If they care about the story and they care about the actors, then they put in the time for the rehearsal time and the character development, and you ask questions until you get them answered and all that kind of stuff. The things that at the Beverly Hills Playhouse, where I met Miguel Ferrer, the things that we hold near and dear, So it's changed. So what I have had to learn after a couple of disasters where I wasn't aware of that, I have to be in character from the moment that I leave the makeup chair until the time I check out, because I don't know when or where they're shooting or shooting from, or when they're shooting, period.
Right.
I just don't know. So you got to be ready at all times.
Yeah.
That's what I do. So, I mean, obviously, if you're having lunch, they're
Yeah,
not
you would
shooting
hope they're not filming. Certainly not with your
you.
character in
Right.
a time war. I can't.
Right.
Maybe there's a lunch scene there. I don't know. But
Right. But that's the best way that I have found to be able to work. Now, on some of these newer shows that I've been on, it takes people aback. Sometimes the crew, often the other actors, and they'll say, I've never seen your work ethic before, you know?
Yeah.
But that's the way, those are the sets and the way that I grew up, you know? I remember one time there was a pilot at Universal Studios and something got mixed up somewhere. Two young kids, we were in late middle school, and I had been cast as one character, and the other young American black boy, real nice fellow, very talented, he got cast in another role. When we went to go shoot, Bruce Bilson, who was the director of that episode, who had done a lot of AD work in the 60s and came up that way, he was the AD on the Andy Griffith Show. He said, "Oh my gosh, there's been a mix-up." He said, "You guys both got cast in the wrong part. You got transposed."
Oh.
Now, I had memorized all the dialogue, and the young fellow I worked with, he had memorized all his dialogue. And literally in a split second, we looked at each other and he said, "We'll be okay. We'll just switch." Okay. We had to do that on the fly. We're what, 12 years old?
Yeah.
And people were freaking out. And they said, "Oh my God, what are we going to do? They got the wrong parts." But this young guy and I said, "Fine, we're good. We'll just switch."
And it worked?
And it worked.
Wow.
Could have been the pilot didn't sell, unfortunately,
No.
but it worked, and we had a job for a few weeks,
Yeah.
So the work ethic is different. The work ethic is different, I think. Not so much for crew. You still have to provide production and production value. Yeah. But as an actor, you got to attack things a little bit differently, I think.
I think as a film fan and as somebody who's watched movies, I prefer the way it used to be. Going into a film not knowing anything about it whatsoever, and then just being enveloped by the storyline, the music, and all those wonderful ingredients you mentioned before. I think nowadays people know too much about a film before it comes out, and I try and ignore it, but unfortunately, if you're online, you can't ignore all that stuff. It just jumps into your face. So I do sort of hark back to the 70s are my favorite decade, 70s and early 80s are my favorite decades for films.
Yes.
And I guess that's just me showing my age. People nowadays like things they are, I prefer cinemas to streaming, but
Hmm.
a lot of people prefer streaming to cinema. So you talked before about asking questions about your character.
Uh-huh.
In the Time War, directed by the hovering around somewhere in the background, Neil Johnson, which
Uh-huh.
hasn't yet come out. I keep pestering Neil. I'm like, when is this thing coming out? When is it? When's it coming out? It seems to, I've been waiting like years for this to come out. I've seen some of the footage. I've seen some of your scenes. You play a famous character, shall we say? What is the story behind you ending up playing Adolf Hitler in Neil Johnson's sci-fi time traveling The Time War? How did that come about? How did Neil go, Stephen, I got a role for you?
I had done a presentation for a film that the author of the book was directing. Was that proper grammar?
I think so.
This-
I understood it. That's all that
right.
matters.
A man named Jared McVeigh had written a book, series of Western books and some adventure books. And one of them was called Not on My Mountain. Uh, Good book. He wanted to make it into a film. And there was a character in there who lived on the side of this mountaintop with his sort of neo-Nazi inspired guys. And they clash with the heroes in the film. The hero's an American Indian who leads some young people and gets them to survive on this mountain, and we're the bad guys, so to speak. The fellow who leads these people is inspired, obviously, by, Adolf Hitler. And there was footage of me on my demo reel where I'm rallying these guys during a political event that we're going to go and sabotage. And that was on my reel. And Neil saw that and thought that that was just a gas,
Mm.
you know? And when I did Rogue Warrior, robot fighter for him, he kept saying, boy, that's the best Hitler that I've ever seen. So when he was writing The Time War, that character was in there and he called me to play that. So this time it was actually an
Yeah.
actual Hitler. So there you go. That's how that came about. That came about like so.
That will be an interesting project to watch when Neil finally does release it. Hurry up and finish it, Neil. That will be a very interesting one. Are you expecting people to go, how could you play this monster? How could you? Because
Right.
we live in that world now where people just go, how could you do such a thing? It's because it's a film. Calm down. Big rip.
Right. Right. Well, I know that Anthony Hopkins played Hitler. A lot of people have played him.
Yeah.
Bruno Gantz.
Oh,
Gosh,
Downfall. Yeah.
Downfall's an
Yeah.
incredible movie, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Um, Isaac Hayes in Escape from New York, when they interview him, he says, hey, the ultimate bad guy, the Duke of New York, I can do no wrong.
Mhm.
And Malcolm McDowell, when he talks about Alex in A Clockwork Orange, he says, he was an absolute bastard, right?
Yeah.
He said, but I can't think of him that way
No.
if I play him. You've got to, you know,
Yeah.
it's a theatrical presentation. So, you got to do it in a detached sort of a way
Yeah.
and just find his passions that kind of made him tick a little bit and put that into your performance.
Is it
So
like every villain doesn't realize they're the villain? They think they're the hero in their own story type
right,
mythology, isn't it?
that
Yeah.
is true. That is true. Speaking of, right before I did the Time War, there was a project Kevin Costner lent his producing credits to called Billy the Kid: New Evidence,
Mm.
and I played Charlie Bowdry in that alongside Billy the Kid. Hey, I got to ride with Billy the Kid
Nice.
across the plains, and I got shot to death at the end. Um, Billy the Kid was not an outlaw. Billy the Kid was a hero.
Yeah.
And it's all now Billy the Kid's much different. He was actually fighting for the people. But yeah, Hitler. You have to be careful playing that
You do.
a little bit. I think I've played it enough. I've done it twice. I don't need
Yeah,
to.
you're like, I
I
don't
don't
want to be
need to
known as the Hitler
well,
guy.
you're right. I don't need
Get
to
me the
do
Hitler guy on the phone. We've got a German
right,
movie being shot. Yeah, you don't
right.
really
But
want
it
to be.
right, but it was necessary for what Neil was trying to
Yeah.
do.
And it's like the
And
Time War, it does have Adolf Hitler in it, but it's not an Adolf Hitler biopic by any means.
right, exactly. It's
You
a
know.
fantasy Adolf Hitler that exists in a
Yeah.
different time line.
Yeah.
So there it is. It's not the guy that we hate,
No.
you know.
Well, going from guys that we hate,
Mhm.
played by guys that we love, because you're amazing. We need to go to one of the all-time heroes, and that is Mr. Spock, who
Oh,
you
right.
played. I rewatched it the other night. I thought
Huh.
I haven't seen Search for Spock for a few years. Seen it a lot of times over the years, big screen, small screen, and I rewatched that for the sole purpose of I'm like I need to watch Steven's scenes again.
Thank you.
Neil was saying seek out deleted scenes. So was there stuff that you shot that wasn't included in the film, to your
Just
knowledge?
there were snippets. The Ponfar went a little bit longer. Robin reached out to touch my face at one part, et cetera, et cetera. But for time, how long can that scene really go on? But it was a great shoot and a great opportunity. Would you like to hear about how I booked
No,
the?
yes, of course I would.
Okay.
Yeah, of course I would.
I made a friend in 1978, man, with with a man named David Jacobs, and he was the man who created the original Dallas TV show. He was, I don't want to say he was a staff writer at Lorimar Productions, but he worked on Family, Eight is Enough, things like the Waltons, things like that. And he pitched him an idea about an oil tycoon named JR, and they bought it, and the rest is history. Okay. Wonderful man. Cast me in a TV show about two teenagers getting married out of high school. The man was Lee McCluskey, the young man. I played his younger brother, and it was a great show. It got good ratings, etc., but they still canceled it in favor of Knots Landing, which was a little racier, I guess.
Yeah.
Whereas the other one was more family and real life oriented, at the time for a show. He cast me in a second TV show. Wonderful gift. That's the only time that that's really happened to me at that level. David was a good person. Just passed away a couple of years ago. I'm still friends with his wife. Um, and in one of these episodes, my character's mother had died, and I couldn't really come to terms with it. I was 16 at this point, and there was an episode where a carnival comes through town, like a carnival circus type of thing. And as I'm passing by a tent, a woman comes out. She's a gypsy fortune teller. And her character sees that I'm kind of introverted, and she brings me into the tent, and she knows something's up. And I talked about my mom and this and that. And so the rest of that episode, my storyline here and there through it, I'm working with this wonderful actress they cast named Zora Lampert. She got an Emmy for Kojak for an
Mhm.
episode where she was a gypsy. She's a very heavy method stage actress. And we worked together for a week on this thing. And my acting coach at the time, Bruce Glover, who also just passed away, he looked at me and he said, Zora Lampert, you better be on your game or she's going to roll over you like a steamroller, kid. We got to get you up to snuff so you can work with her. I loved her. I thought she was great. I knew exactly what she was doing with me. Often she would sit on that set and she'd say, I don't want to call you Stephen. I want to call you Danny by your character's name. Perfect.
Yeah.
I got you. I know right where you're going. I'd worked with Tommy Lee Jones and a couple of other people who were very heavy method, and I enjoyed that.
Mhm.
Uh, I attended the Beverly Hills Playhouse where I met Miguel Ferrer in order to get a foothold in that acting arena and that style, which I really enjoyed. So I got a call from my manager, Dorothy Deoda. She said they want to see you for Star Trek 3. I went on the audition. There were no sides. There was also no casting person. The secretary opened up the door and said, "Leonard, we'll see you now." And I walked in, and there he was, sitting in his office. And he said, "You've been around a long time." I said, "Yes." He says, I've seen some of your work. I know who you are." And the big question came up, and he looked at me and he said, "How did you like working with Zora?" Now, she was so heavy and such a good actress, she intimidated a lot of people. And when I came, she wrote me kind of, it almost was like a love letter after that thing. She gave it to me about working with me, on this. And it was a good experience. So I said to him, I said, I loved her. I thought she was wonderful, great actress, wonderful lady. We did wonderful work together. And right then, Leonard said, "Great." He said, "That's what I want to hear." Why? He was a friend of hers. He
Ah,
loved
yeah.
theater. He had worked with her before. He knew her quite well. He knew that if I could work with her, then I could work with him, because he told me, he said, Star Trek's been a big part of my life. When I die, everybody's going to remember me as Spock. He says, "I love theater. I love doing other things too, but that's always going to be my big one. And I have a tremendous responsibility to that." So he said, I said, "Who am I going to be playing?" He said, "You're going to be playing me as a younger guy. There's a sequence in there with the Ponfar. I want to explore that." And he said, "You don't have dialogue like you did with Zora, not the big heavy dialogue scenes, but I want you to bring the same thing to it." I said, "Okay, gotcha." So that's how that came about. And one of the last things he said to me in the it was a meeting. It wasn't really an audition. Was, "Look," he said, "you're playing me." He said, "You'll be known for this, for Star Trek, for the rest of your life." He said, "But you're also playing me. So I want you to treat the fans well, respect the Star Trek community on my behalf,
Yeah.
respect me." And I said, "You came to the right place. Exactly. That's what I'll do."
And Leonard he had an extra pressure on because obviously he's known for the role of Spock, but he was taking the director's chair for
Yeah.
Search for Spock. And I know reading back on things, the studios were like, really? Do we really, because it wasn't a thing where they let actors so much. And I th would he have felt that extra pressure of or not?
I, you know, I could go on a dissertation about a lot of things that are quote said, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Books, magazines, fan books, even a couple of books I got just recently on the making of Jaws.
Hmm.
Um, this is from me. I was there. I could see it. He was really, really well prepared. He wanted to direct. I know he had directed some theater. Okay. He knew the character in and out. He knew all the characters in and out. He had a great producer with him, Harv Bennett. Harv Bennett was not going to let him fail
No.
and fall through the cracks. He was there to help him. And as a team, they worked really, really well together. They really did. Harv was a nice man also, treated me wonderfully. So, was there pressure? Obviously. When people say something is a low budget movie, "Oh, it's just a $4 million movie."
Yeah.
I think you and I could live on $4 million
Easily.
pretty well, pretty
I
well.
could live on a percentage of that $4 million
Exactly.
pretty well. Yeah.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
when you're talking about motion picture and television industry, it eats up money. I
Hmm.
mean, the craft service bill is incredible per
Yeah.
day on some of those sets. It really is. Uh, but he had a lot of pressure to do a good job. I don't think he had any doubt that he wasn't going to be able to pull it off. He knew film grammar,
Yeah.
to be able to shoot it well. He had a nice cinematographer with him, and the crew was there to help him out. Um, and the set ran very, very smoothly, very, very smoothly. I was there longer than the other Spocks. There were four of us.
Yeah.
there was a young guy that played him at 6 in the snow
Hmm.
area of the Genesis set. There was a young man who played him for one shot in a tree trunk where he was sweating, and then the earthquake happens and he's
Yeah.
going into Pond Far, and then it's me.
You're there, and then transitions into the Leonard Nimoy that we're familiar with, doesn't it?
Right. There's one guy between me and Leonard.
Is that okay?
There's a fella named Joe Davis. I go down, Robin comes over, and Joe gets up like
Ah,
this.
yeah,
And then Joe throws a Klingon, and then Joe goes back down, and then you see it turn into Leonard.
yeah,
So Joe was there, but I was there the longest.
yeah.
I knew a lot of people on that set already, some of them from the Love Boat, some of them from Little House on the Prairie. So that was very comfortable,
And you,
to
so you would have been familiar with how big Star Trek was back then. I mean, I
oh
saw
yeah.
I saw the motion picture in
Uh-huh.
'79. I liked it at 70. I know over the years people go, oh, it's boring. And I think that's the way that people watch films now compared to the films that they watched back then. I think it is a slow paced film, the first one, but it's a beautiful looking film that still holds up.
Uh-huh.
Two was huge. Everybody
Yes,
hails. Two was the best one.
right.
I like lots of them all the same. I think two, three, and four work really well as a story arc.
Oh, uh-huh.
And if three fell down, then the whole story arc would fall down, really, wouldn't it? But I don't think Leonard did a good job. I think he did a great job
Yes, yes. He
directing it.
was, he was a nice man. I know a couple of times he slept in his office at the studio.
Yeah,
Okay. Because the hours were long and it was grueling, and people were coming at him right and left all the time with things that needed taken care of. And
yeah.
if he could delegate them to somebody else or whatever, the ADs or whatever, he had to handle it. So um, he did a wonderful job. He
Did.
really, really did. And he was very nice to me. One thing I wish I had inherited, playing him as a younger guy, was inheriting his voice. He had
Yeah. Very recognizable voice.
oh, deep baritone voice. I'm older, I still don't have it. So I wish I did. But he was an elegant man, a classy man. He respected Star Trek
Yeah.
fan world as well as the professional world
Hmm.
as well.
Which he
Mhm.
said to you, didn't he? You remember you saying before, he's like, you've got to respect the fans and be nice to. And I think Star Wars fans are crazier nowadays, but the Star Trek fans are really passionate, but
Mhm.
but nice with it. I don't think there was ever I certainly never witnessed the toxic Star Trek fans. Plenty of Star Wars fans are toxic nowadays, unfortunately, or fans, as I should say. But the Star Trek fans, me included, I think just love the whole universe that it's become. But you were there in one of the earlier days. Obviously, the original TV seasons had
Mhm.
happened, and there'd been two movies, and you were there on the third. How much did that change your life being in something that big, or did it not change it hugely?
Two answers to the question. One, I was a fan of my own things. I love Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
My God, who doesn't, right?
Yep.
I loved the original Star Wars back in '77. I think it's
Hmm.
wonderful. Uh, love Dirty Harry. How can you not love
Love
Dirty
it.
Harry? So I
Yep.
was a fan of my own things as well.
Yeah.
Those big blockbuster films, Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark,
Hmm.
those types of things. You and I were there when that kind of thing was new.
Yeah.
Now it's quite commonplace between Marvel and
Mm.
DC and all of the different things that are
Universes.
out
Yeah.
there.
Everybody's got a
Yeah,
universe
I mean,
nowadays.
I mean, the pop culture has just exploded like you wouldn't
Yeah.
believe. But back then it was still very niche, you know.
It was an event, wasn't it, back then?
Right,
It was
and it
like,
was an event to go to a movie.
yeah.
I remember I went to go and see Star Trek 3. It had been out for a few days. My friend and I went to go see it at the Pacific Cinerama Dome in Hollywood, that
Mhm.
famous theater that's shaped like a dome. And the line stretched down the block. Nobody knew I was in it, of course. They hadn't been into the film, and my eye color was different because they put brown contact lenses in my eye, and I didn't have my ears on.
Nope.
So I could just go incognito. But I remember Walter Koenig walking up and down the line signing autographs for people. He just went to the Cinerama Dome to see the
Nice.
fans, you know. I knew it was very, very important. It was a huge film, a lot of anticipation. But my paramount concern was A, respect Leonard and give him what he wanted and do a good job and not slack.
Hmm.
And there was one scene where the Klingon is going to kill one of us, right? And I think he's going to go and kill Robin Curtis, and that's when Merrick fights the guy. So there, Leonard was staging the shot, and he knew he wanted the camera to see each character as the knife was kind of going behind them, right? And I talked to him and I said, I know I'm not supposed to be thinking my brain is with Dr. McCoy someplace, etc. But I thought just to have some continuity for you, hey, I'll be a method actor here for a second. I said, the little boys, they're so young, you wouldn't see it. But I'm 17 and I just had Pon farr with Robin. You might start to see something come out in that's going to give continuity, that it's going to become you. And he said, right. I said, so watch this. When the guy went behind me with the knife, all I did very subtle was raise my right eyebrow.
Mhm.
Oh boy, method actor, But he noticed it and he said, that's just enough. And so just little things like that to give him. And I remember one of the guys on the crew saying, Steve's been around a long time.
And you're like, oh, not that long. I'm
Yeah,
still
you know.
still a youngin.
So I was grateful for that. Just give him a little something to help him out.
When was the last time you watched it? Do you watch the things that you're in or no? Some actors don't. Some are like, if it's on, I'll see it. I don't run out of room or anything. But
There's some things that I can watch. There's other things I can't because you start picking apart what you did. I could have done this
yeah.
better. I could have done that better. I remember that day we were under so much pressure or whatever it was.
Hmm.
So sometimes it's awkward to watch yourself. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And what's next for you? I mean, you've never stopped working. Looking at your filmography, you've got 4 or 5 projects due out. One of them, Time War. Come on, Neil,
Right.
sort that out. Hopefully, he's
Right.
editing it in the other room.
Yes. Yes.
Um, are there any roles that you would love to play? What can you talk about for the future? We spent a lot of time talking about the past and the beginnings and stuff.
Mhm. Well, the industry is changing. There's a lot of talk about that right now. Uh, I think I think for a fellow like me, I've been pontificating about this for a while. Independent filmmakers is going to be the avenue that best suits me. I
Mm,
think. You know, um, right now the industry is in quite a strange place. There's not much union work coming down the pike for people. So I'm thinking that, like the big TV shows and stuff like
yeah.
that. So I'm thinking that smaller independent personal projects will be a great venue for somebody like me. I love working with Neil. We
Yeah.
just celebrated our 10-year anniversary
Wow.
uh,
Yep.
of, of being friends. The Time War is starting to wrap up. He has a couple of projects that he wants to talk to me about.
Hmm.
I have a dear friend named Chris Cranock, who is an independent filmmaker who's more on the Euro cinema, world cinema side of things.
Yep.
He's got his first feature film called L'Imposture,
Okay.
all shot in French, some of it in English. He shot it in Paris with Julie Zeno as the lead, based on a play that he wrote. So Chris's projects are getting off of the ground.
Okay.
Uh, so those are things that I'm hoping to be more of a part of and have an outlet for.
And what do you do when you relax? Are you do you read lots of books? Are you, movie fan like I am? Or how does Stephen relax?
How does Stephen really?
Does Stephen relax is probably a better way to phrase that question. Do you ever
Oh
relax?
boy, I like to do a bunch of things. I like to make replica props, so I have some things that I do. I do molding. I worked for a friend of mine who made wax figures for the wax museums for
Okay.
years. David
Cool.
Roberts Speedy, dear friend of mine to this day. So he taught me how to make molds. I have a great friend who's a filmmaker named Matt Green, has a place called Magic Film Company. He's in Cray, makes monsters and all kinds of stuff. So I'll work with Matt sometimes. And I love to paint miniatures and things like that. Yeah, that's what I like to do. I also love history. I like to read a lot about history. I study Lawrence a lot. I study World War II, the Crusades, things like that. So, a bit eclectic, but those are the things that I like to do to relax. Although my daughter and my wife don't give me much time to relax,
Oh
especially
no.
when there's things to do around the house. So,
Yes. Are you
like,
a very sort of handy person in fixing things? And I'm
I,
I'm I'm not, to be fair. I can tighten a pipe or but
right.
I'm not plastering a wall anytime soon.
You know something? I'm not good at it. I can muscle my way through some things, but it takes me quite a while to do, which is why our bathroom's been hanging for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
But one of them. Hopefully when that's done, there's not too much. I can paint. I'll put it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty good at painting.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
That'll do.
But all but the big construction stuff,
No.
it's not my forte.
You're not building a house anytime soon from a bunch
Yeah,
of
that ain't
planks
good.
and a handful of nails. No,
You're
me
right.
me neither.
Right.
No.
Lincoln logs, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Legos, I can do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm good at rewiring like Blu-ray players and DVD players, and I'm one of
Oh,
them that still has physical media.
uh-huh.
I do love a disc.
Right.
Um,
I do too. I
yeah,
prefer physical media. I'm not much for leaving it up to an ethereal being, because things can disappear on you.
yeah.
You know, what if you want to see Fellini's Roma and it's not there anymore?
Or
That's why we have it.
Cinema Paradiso. I
Yeah, or
the
Cinema
two
Paradiso.
Blu-ray set with both versions of the film on. That is
Right.
about 10 feet away from me. I added the Deer Hunter the other day to my DVD collection, which I didn't own that one, so it's now in my collection. I can watch it whenever I wish without having to go online and find out which platform it is that I'm paying
Yes.
for. No,
Yes. I used to back in the day, late 70s, there was a
man.
beautiful
Yep.
theater. Hey, man.
Yeah.
There was a beautiful theater that was built in the 20s in South Pasadena, and it was called the Rialto Theater. And in the late 70s, a group called Landmark bought it, and they put out a calendar for the month. And every single day, like 2 days out of the week, with a couple of stragglers. They would change the film up. They'd have a Fellini night, a Woody Allen night, a Monty Python night. They'd have a Bergman night. They'd have a De Sica night. I mean, and it was great. They had an espresso bar inside the theater, and this was in '79. Before that
Yeah.
was really trendy. That was the first place I ever saw a cappuccino in my life. It was an event to go to the Rialto and see a movie, especially one of these great, great films. It's gone now,
Yeah.
so I have to rebuild my Rialto collection with physical media
You
so
do
that
indeed.
so that we can see some of these things at home.
You do
So we have
indeed.
our Rialto night once a week if we can, and watch some
Nice.
of these
Well,
things.
keep me updated and let me know what you watch. I'm always interested.
Oh, all right, very good.
It has been an absolute pleasure to be able to sit down and I think it's been many years coming. Every time Neil would mention you, I'm like, I'd love to speak to Steve. He was in a Star Trek movie. It's amazing. And I'm so glad that Neil sort of nudged me the other week. He's like, "Do you want to do that conversation?" I'm like, "Oh yes, please."
Oh my, thank
And it's been as lovely as I hoped it could be and it would be.
oh
So thank you very much for taking some time out
sure.
to chat with a film geek like me. It's been
No,
you
no,
have a
no.
fascinating life. Your grandfather had a fascinating life. The
Thank you.
filmography, both big screen and small screen, is kind of mind blowing. And I look forward to what you do in the future as well. I'll be there watching it,
Oh,
including the Time War, Neil.
including the Time War, Neil.
Yeah,
Yes.
hurry up, hurry up, finish that thing. But I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, Stephen.
Thank
And
you very much. Thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure. It's
anytime.
always nice to talk to people. And don't I'm going to rename that. It's not Film Geek. It's Cinephile. Okay.
Cinephile. Yeah, that sounds better than film geek, doesn't it? So yeah, I will go for cinemaphile. But thank you very much.
Okay.
All right.
Terrific. All right. Well, we'll see you next time. All
You
right.
will indeed. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye bye.